Before tonight's tale begins, I ask you to listen with intention. This is not a case of clarity, not a tale where justice strides confidently to the final pages. Tonight's story is a quiet descent, a slow tightening of dread. It begins with a simple thing, a letter, a mark, 5 orange pips tucked inside an envelope, like an afterthought. But in this tale, nothing is simple. What follows is not the unraveling of a grand conspiracy, or the dramatic cornering of a villain in the night. No, what follows is a reckoning, one that even Sherlock Holmes, in all his precision and genius, could not prevent. This is a story without resolution, and that may be the most unsettling truth of all. It's a reminder that justice, like the weather, does not always arrive on time, that even the sharpest mind can be caught in the fog, and that sometimes evil does not wait to be seen. It simply passes through like a ship in mist, leaving only ripples behind. I choose to share this story not for the comfort it offers, because it offers none, but for what it preserves. The atmosphere of inevitability, the bitter taste of unfinished business. It is a warning, a record, and a shadow that lingers long after the last word is spoken. So dim the lights. Let the storm roll in. Tonight, we open the case of the 5 orange pips, and may the silence that follows speak louder than any verdict. The rain had turned mean by sundown, lashing the windows of 221B Baker Street like an angry tide. It beat against the glass with a steady rhythm, drumming out the city's usual sounds and leaving only the crackle of our fire and the low rustle of pages turning. Sherlock Holmes sat across from me, stretched long in his chair, one arm draped over the side, the other loosely cradling his pipe. The coal fire glinted in his eyes, though they were half-lidded, more focused inward than out. For the better part of an hour he hadn't spoken a word. Outside, the gas lamps cast a dim, shivering glow through the sheets of rain. The street below was almost entirely deserted. No wheels turning, no footsteps clapping across the pavement. London was holding its breath. I had tried reading, but the words floated past me without landing. My thoughts kept drifting to Holmes, his silence, his stillness. There was a kind of pressure in the air, like the moment before lightning forks through the clouds. He stirred then, as if cued by the very thought of him. "Watson," he said without opening his eyes, "you're wondering why I haven't spoken for the last 50 minutes. I smiled faintly. "Well, you are rarely silent without reason." He opened his eyes slowly, as if returning from a place far deeper than sleep. "Because there is nothing to say. The day's events are dull, the streets are damp, and even the thieves have retired to dry cellars." He took a slow draw from his pipe, then exhaled, letting the smoke curl up toward the ceiling. "And yet," he added softly, "something is coming. I can feel it." A pause passed between us. Then, as if to prove his point, a sharp knock rattled the door below. He sat upright. "Ah," Holmes murmured, setting his pipe aside. "Let us see what kind of weather has blown this one in." The knock came again, sharper this time, cutting through the storm like a blade. Holmes stood, motioned to Miss Hudson, and moments later our visitor entered. The young man who stepped into the room was drenched through, his coat heavy with rain, his face pale and drawn. But it was not the weather that had shaken him. It was something deeper, something that clung to him. He looked to be in his early 20s, narrow frame, nervous eyes. Those eyes darted briefly across the room before locking onto Holmes. "Mr. Holmes?" he asked, his voice taut. "You found him," Holmes said gently. "Come, sit by the fire. You're safe here." He hesitated, then crossed the room, sinking into the chair Holmes had gestured toward. He held his hat like a fragile thing, twisting it slowly between his fingers. "My name is John Openshaw," he said, "and I don't know if I'm in danger or mad, but I believe something terrible is happening." Holmes leaned forward. "Tell us everything, Mr. Openshaw, from the beginning." John drew a breath, steadying himself. It began with my uncle Elias Openshaw. He lived in Florida for many years and fought in the war on the side of the South. After the war ended, he returned to England and bought an estate near Horsham in Sussex. Large house, isolated. He lived there alone for a time until he invited me to live with him when I was 12. You lived under his roof? I asked. He nodded. Yes. My father, Joseph Openshaw, remained in London. He ran a marine outfitting business, respectable, but my uncle wanted company and offered to pay for my education. My parents agreed. I think they hoped it might settle Uncle Elias. He was generous, John continued, but he was strange, always on edge. He drank heavily and never allowed anyone into his study. He had a revolver he kept close, sometimes even wore it while walking in the garden. He was obsessed with secrecy. Holmes' eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Then one morning, a letter arrived. It had no return address, just a London postmark. Inside were 5 dried orange pips, and a scrap of paper with 3 letters printed in ink. KKK. Even in the warmth of the sitting room, I felt a chill. My uncle's face went white. He said nothing, just locked himself in his study. That night, he burned a number of papers, old letters, journals, official documents. I saw the smoke. He didn't speak of it again. John's gaze dropped to the floor. A week later, they found him face down in the garden pond. The police said it was suicide, but I knew better. He'd been hunted. He looked up, his expression hollow. 2 years passed. I moved back to my father's home in London. Then it happened again. Holmes' eyes sharpened. Another letter? Yes, John said. This time it came addressed to my father, Joseph Openshaw. Same envelope, same 5 orange pips. He had no idea what it meant, but I recognized the signs. I begged him to take it seriously. He laughed it off. John's voice caught slightly. 3 days later, he left for work as usual, but never arrived. They found him in the Thames. He didn't know how to swim. The police called it an accident. Holmes stood, the firelight catching the angles of his face. And now, he said, the letter has come to you. John nodded slowly. Yes. It arrived 3 days ago. No return, just the pips. I burned it, like my uncle did. But nothing's happened yet. I don't know what to do. There was a long silence. Only the storm continued. Holmes stepped toward the hearth and clasped his hands behind his back. The past, he said quietly, has a long shadow. Holmes stood by the fireplace, silent. The flickering flames dancing across his features. Then he turned sharply. Mr. Openshaw, your uncle's fate is disturbing, but I find myself more curious about your father. John looked up, startled. My father? Why? Because his death, though dismissed as accident, arrived under the same harbinger as your uncle. 5 orange pips, sent without explanation, and he took no action? I tried to warn him, John said, his voice laced with guilt. I told him what had happened to Uncle Elias, showed him the envelope and the pips. He laughed, said it was someone's idea of a prank. Watson leaned forward. Had he ever mentioned any contact with your uncle's affairs? Papers, connections in America, anything of the sort? John hesitated. Not directly, but there was something odd. After Uncle Elias died, Father tried to settle his estate. There were documents missing, whole ledgers gone. And he kept receiving letters, some from abroad. I think he opened something he shouldn't have. Holmes' eyes glinted. Did he correspond with America? Yeah, John replied. He mentioned sending inquiries to Florida and Georgia. Said some of Uncle's land deeds and legal affairs were unfinished. But when I asked what he found, he just said, dead ends. Best left buried. Holmes nodded slowly. Buried, but not forgotten, it seems. Watson folded his hands. And in the days before his death, anything strange? John shifted uneasily. He was agitated, restless. He'd paced the study at night. I heard him arguing on the telephone once, quiet but angry. Then, 3 days after the envelope arrived, he was gone. Holmes turned his gaze to the fire. Drowned, like your uncle. Yes. They found him in the Thames, said he slipped while boarding a ship near the docks, but father didn't drink, didn't take unnecessary risks, and he hated the water. The silence in the room deepened. Holmes broke it. You say that the envelope sent to him was identical to your uncle's. Nearly. Plain, no sender, London postmark. The same pips, same paper, same 3 letters, KKK. Holmes nodded once. Then we are not dealing with coincidence. We are dealing with vengeance, carried across time, perhaps even oceans. Watson looked toward John, who sat stiffly, hands clenched in his lap. And now it's come to you. John's voice was barely more than a whisper. Yes. The next morning, Holmes was already dressed and upright at the window when I descended, teacup in hand. Rain still streaked the glass, but it had softened to a steady whispering drizzle. The morning light slanted across Holmes's desk, where he'd drawn a rough sketch from memory, a blank envelope, 5 dried orange pips, and a scrap of notation beneath it, penned in his own hand. The letter itself John had destroyed, but its weight lingered, like a toxin still coursing through the bloodstream of the case. He burned the original, Holmes said, tapping the paper. But I remember it perfectly. Fear sharpens recall. I've sent Openshaw home, he continued, eyes still on the sketch. Told him to carry on as if nothing is amiss. If they are indeed watching him, I'd rather we not force their hand prematurely. He turned toward me then, his expression taut and precise. Watson, this is no mere family curse. We're standing at the edge of a transatlantic vendetta, one seeded decades ago in the ashes of a war America is still trying to forget. He stepped toward the bookshelf, pulling a worn volume free. The Ku Klux Klan, he said, opening to a marked page. Tennessee, 1866. Born of war and grievance. Symbols, threats, secrecy. The 5 pips were among their earliest calling cards. I read the passage beside him. But what's their link to England? Holmes snapped the book shut. Elias Openshaw. He brought something across the sea. Papers, names, proof of something that was never meant to leave America. And when he hesitated to destroy it, they came for him. He crossed to the table where a map of London had been tacked down with brass pins. All 3 letters were posted from different districts in the city. Whoever sent them is careful, practiced, and local. But there's a pattern, and the trail hasn't gone cold. A quiet hung in the air. What can we do? I asked. Holmes' gaze darkened. We follow the trail. Ink, fiber, footprints and soot. It all tells a story. He slipped on his coat and took up his cane. I'm starting at the shipping offices near the docks. If the Klan has crossed the Atlantic, they'll need passage, correspondence, protection, and that leaves traces. At the door he paused. If I'm not back by evening, don't wait up. And Watson, keep your revolver close. 2 days passed without word. Then, just after sunset, the front door creaked open. Holmes stepped in, his coat heavy with rain, his boots caked with mud, and a silence clinging to him like fog. He didn't speak. He removed his gloves with deliberate care, set aside his cane, and moved to the fire. He stared into the flames. I waited. Finally, in a voice flat with restraint, he said, He's dead. A weight dropped in my chest. John Openshaw? Holmes gave a small nod, his gaze fixed on the coals. Pulled from the Thames near Waterloo Bridge. The police believe it was the storm. A slip, perhaps. An accident. His jaw tightened. But we know better. I sank into the chair opposite him. He trusted us, I said quietly. Holmes remained standing, then crossed to the table. His notebook was already open, pages scrawled with ink and fury. Names, dates, lines of passage. I traced the origin of the letter, he said. It was sent from a ship docked in London, a barque called the Lone Star, out of Savannah. 3 crewmen aboard matched the description of known clan operatives, men who should have disappeared years ago. He flipped the notebook shut. They used the ship as shelter, moved through British ports under false names, sent the letters, left bodies behind. I looked up. Where are they now? He met my eyes. His were cold steel. They sailed yesterday, bound for Lisbon. I sent a wire to Portuguese authorities, gave them the names, the ship, the pattern. If they act quickly... He let the thought trail. But it won't bring Openshaw back. Holmes sat at last, across from me, the fire-casting shadows that cut along the planes of his face. He looked tired. Not from exertion, but from the weight of inevitability. This case, he said, will follow me. You did what you could, I offered. He gave me the barest shake of his head. I saw it coming, Watson. The line was visible, the pattern clear, and still. He exhaled slowly. Still, we were a day too late. The room fell into silence. Outside, the storm had passed, but in the hollow stillness of Baker Street, the air carried the shape of something unfinished, and a reckoning yet owed. Of all the cases I have chronicled in my long association with Sherlock Holmes, few weigh upon me with such quiet gravity as this one. Not merely for the injustice left unresolved, but for the way darkness slipped past us, silent and unchallenged, into the fog. No satisfaction, no revelation, not even the cold comfort of closure. The 5 orange pips were sent, the warnings passed unnoticed, and 3 lives were carried off by shadows. I often wonder whether Holmes felt it. He rarely gave voice to such things. He spoke of logic, probabilities, and the elegance of deduction, but I have seen, on rare occasions, the glint of regret behind those steel-gray eyes. His mind did not wear failure well, and though he would never say so aloud, I believe this case haunted him in its own deliberate way. As for myself, I am left with the echo of questions. That a letter, a superstition, a secret society born in another land, could reach across the oceans and decades to exact revenge in a quiet London street. That evil travels not by law, but by memory. And memory, I have learned, can be a cruel tide. I recorded this account not for triumph, but as testament, that even the sharpest minds may stumble, even the swiftest pursuits may arrive one step too late. The world does not always offer justice, but still, we must bear witness. And so the trail of the 5 orange pips ends, not with triumph, but with the echo of justice unfulfilled, drifting into the fog with the unanswered questions left behind. If this tale unsettled you, as it did poor Watson and myself, then it has done its work. To those of you still standing beside me, my dear patrons, your continued support means more than I can say. Like the lanterns burning in Baker Street's windows through London's darkest nights, you keep this journey lit. And to you, listener, who lent me your time and presence today, thank you. In a world full of noise, your choice to join me here speaks volumes. Until the next case, stay curious and tread carefully.